Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and call to order the License and Variance Board meeting for October the 14th. It is 10:02 a.m. My name is Roy Acree. I'm the fire chief here in the city of Smyrna. To my left is Frank Martin, the director of public works. To his left is Richard Garland, the Parks and Rec director. Also present on the board would be our assistant city clerk, Tina Monahan, here for the official meeting minutes. First item on the agenda is item 3A. Excuse me. The appointment, this is just a little bit of legislative or legal stuff that we're doing here. We've got some new board members in different positions. So the first item is 3A, appointment of Fire Chief Roy Acree to serve as chair of the License and Variance Board and the Deputy City Clerk, Tina Monahan, to serve as secretary for License and Variance Board. This is not a public hearing. Do I hear a motion? Call for motion for 3A.
I make a motion to approve Fire Chief Roy Acree to serve as chair of the License and Variance Board and the Deputy City Clerk, Tina Monahan, to serve as the secretary for the License and Variance Board.
Second the motion.
Motion to approve 3A has been properly seconded. If there's no discussion, I'll call for the vote, and I'll abstain for the vote, obviously. Motion to approve, call for the vote. All those in favor? 2-0. So just for a little background, the License and Variance Board is made up of permanent members and also alternate members. The city, through the city clerk's office, there was a vote of all alternate and sitting members on who chairs this committee, and also to bring in new members as permanent or new members as alternate. Also, the board secretary or deputy city clerk. So that's just kind of a little bit of background behind that. Next item on the agenda is 3B, public hearing V20-048 to allow parking on a gravel surface, land lot 630-3075 Jonquil Drive, FP Gimmel, Georgia, LP. This item to be tabled to October 28th, 2020, License and Variance Board meeting. From city staff, is there any other on that? They're going to table it to the next meeting. Any questions or comments? This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak either for or against item 3B, I'd ask that you step forward now. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for 3B.
Motion to table item 2020-371, public hearing. V20-048, allow parking on a gravel surface, land lot 630-3075 Jonquil Drive, FP Gimmel, GALP, that this item would be tabled until the October 28th License and Variance Board meeting.
Second.
Motion table's been seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the table? None opposed. Motion passes 3-0. Next item on the agenda is item 3C, public hearing V20-053 to allow a 5-foot fence in the front yard, land lot 560 for 2711 Gilbert Street, Patrick and Kara Thurman. I tell you, let's do this. If there is anyone here that wants to speak either for or against this agenda item in the near future, or even if you think you may want to and you're not sure, let's go ahead and have everybody come up and get sworn in by our city attorney. So if you think that you might even want to speak when I call for public input on this issue, I'd ask that you'd step forward now to get sworn in. Thank you all for that. We'll call for public hearing or input in just a minute. So the applicant is Patrick and Kara Thurman. Are the applicants present? Okay, sir, if you could please step forward. And feel free when you're at the podium to either leave your mask on or remove your mask. Sometimes it's a little bit easier for us to hear, with the mask off. But good morning. Could you state your name for the record, please? Is that microphone on?
Patrick Thurman.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Thurman. And you live at 2711 Gilbert Street, is that
I do.
correct? Okay. So talk to us about the 5-foot fence in the front yard at your
Yeah,
house.
so a couple months ago, or maybe a month and a half ago, we called the city planning office to get clear on the code for the fence for the front yard. We had a fence company scheduled to come out. I understand during COVID they were changing operating procedures, and I think they were still adapting as everybody was. But we weren't able to get a call back. We left multiple messages. I spoke to somebody at the front desk a couple times, was assured we'd get a call back. So I just want to acknowledge we tried to do our due diligence to build the fence to code. I've since found the codes online. I searched prior to building it, and I wasn't able to find them, and I wish I'd been more successful. But we weren't able to get a call back to get clear on the codes. So the fence company showed up. Their recommendation was if we did a 12-foot setback, they thought we'd be fine. The plan was to put up a fence so that we could get 2 new dogs. We have a rescue dog now who's getting older. We're just looking to rescue 2 more, and a 4-foot fence won't give us approval for a dog adoption. So we went with the 5-foot fence, hoping we were doing the right thing. We intentionally did it as a split rail fence so it doesn't block views. We realized if we did a picket fence, it would look like a big wall. We didn't want that. I know Smyrna doesn't want that. And on top of that, our property, the grade is about 3.5 feet higher than the street. So if we were to do a picket fence, it would be a really tall wall for anybody who's walking by. And I just want to, almost every neighbor, not every neighbor, but virtually every neighbor who walks by comments on how nice it looks. We've really cleaned up the property a lot during COVID, and the fence was sort of the capstone piece for it. And we've received a lot of support for it, a lot of emails from folks that hopefully went into the application supporting as well. So we tried our best, and I realized that if it weren't during COVID, I would have walked down and talked to the nice folks at the planning office, and this wouldn't have happened. But now we paid for somebody to put in a fence, and it doesn't meet code.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll call for city staff to come up and give some background on this. Thank you, Landon. Ms. Crow.
All right. Good morning. Caitlin Crow, Planner 1 Community Development. So this variance is V19-053 to allow a 5-foot fence in the front yard. So this subject property is 0.67 acre lot on the east side of Gilbert Street. The applicant has installed a 5-foot wooden split rail fence, as Mr. Thurman indicated, in the front yard, which was actually replacing a 6-foot wooden privacy fence that was actually behind the front setback line and did meet code at the time. And Section 503A allows for 4-foot fences in the front yard, cannot go higher than that. So the Gilbert Street frontage does have a front setback of 35 feet, which does really give the applicant plenty of room to install that 5-foot fence outside of the front setback and still maintain room for those dogs and the vegetable garden that he has growing there. And as that is shown too with the fence that was removed. So that fence was behind the setback. It still provided the room. Thus, the hardship really is self-created and can be avoided. No other variances have been approved previously for having over a 4-foot fence in the in the front yard that's not a corner lot. So this is the first one that we could bring in front of the board. But that being said, community development has received 3 emails from neighboring properties in support of the request. And all 3 have indicated that they do enjoy the fence there and do think that it has a good aesthetic quality for the neighborhood. So it has been properly posted and there were no site distance issues. But after receiving the variance application and doing a thorough review, staff do recommend denial for this request. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So, Ms. Crow, any variance application that comes before you guys in your office, it's, and help me out if I misstate this, it's measured against 4 primary standards. All of them are, right?
That is correct.
And they either meet or they don't meet those standards.
That's
So
correct.
how many standards did this application meet of those 4?
Unfortunately, none of them.
None of them. Okay.
Correct.
And you'd mentioned, because this, you mentioned like a corner lot. The License and Variance Board has approved front, fences higher than 4 feet, but only for properties that have not only corner lots, but have 2 public road frontages. So we have lots in the city, residential lots, that may have a road in what you and I would call the backyard, and a road that what you and I would call the front yard. But by the interpretation of the ordinance, those would both be front yards, right?
Correct.
And obviously, a corner lot, like you said, 2 public access, or 2 public roads. So this property, this subject property is not a corner. There's only 1 public road, is that right?
Correct.
So-
Yeah, it only faces Gilbert Street.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? This is a public hearing. I'd ask that, I know we had a couple people sworn in for this. This is a public hearing. If you want to speak either for or against item 3C, I would ask that you would step forward now. And sir, if you could please, I'm just going to ask you a few questions at first. Could you
Okay.
please state your name for the record?
Ron Davis,
Mr. Davis, and what is your address, sir?
1351 Roswell Street, Smyrna.
1351. And what's the relation of your property to this subject property?
We have a common fence line
Common fence line.
with the house that we live in, vacant lots between our house and the house on the extreme eastern side of our property.
Okay.
That is now rented.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Let me just say this is nothing personal, but I got to do what I got to do. Liz and I have worked in this neighborhood for 30 years, trying to help it advance since the word got out that we were going to have a thing called Market Village. Excuse me. Developers got interested, and we've worked with them for over 30 years, and not a developer has come into that neighborhood that we haven't worked with to try to better their project for the good of the neighborhood. And the thing that we stressed during all of those meetings, and what we've tried to do, not only Liz and I, but the whole neighborhood, the emphasis has been on maintaining the character of the neighborhood and on maintaining density. Density doesn't play into this issue, but character does. The fence in question is completely out of character. It's a pasture fence. It would look good out in the country with cattle in it or hogs in it. It's too high, as we all know, so it's against code. It's out of character. It's got hog wire on it in the front yard, and the posts are landscape timbers rather than a normal 4x4. I don't really have a problem with the landscape timbers. But when the occupants moved here, they told us that they were coming from a farm or a ranch or something similar. And we've had some problems with things that should have been on a ranch and a farm rather than in a mid to low density neighborhood. We've got chickens in the backyard. That's not the issue here, but we've got chickens in the backyard, and the coop is on the property line. If this were Cobb County ordinance driving this, chicken coops are supposed to be 25 feet off the property line. We've had goats in the yard. No coordination with me or Liz about the chicken coop or the goats until the last minute on the goat issue. They came and knocked on the door and asked us to make sure that we okayed where the fence was going in for the goats to stay. The goats were there temporarily, and I guess the purpose of them was to take down the ivy, which we hated to see go. So we've had chickens and goats, and now we've got what's called a portable chicken pen in the yard. And we got that from a neighbor. I don't know what it is, but we're told it's a portable chicken pen for the purpose of being able to put chickens wherever you want to. And I hope that's not the plan in the yard, because chickens should be in the backyard. So when he came to see me recently about the fence, after we had already received the mail, the legal notice in the mail, he said it would be a hardship for him to take the fence down because of tough times this year. We've all, I guess, had tough times this year. But my reaction to that, if it's a hard time to have to modify it, why did it go up in the first place? And I suspect that fence was put up, and I don't know this, and this is not an allegation, but I suspect it was put up, and we've been told by a couple other neighbors, for the purpose of having goats. Now it's for the purpose of having a puppy. Well, puppy fences should be in the backyard, not in the front yard. And a 5-foot fence is not required for a puppy or another dog. The other dog's been there since they moved in there, and there's never been a fence there for that dog, so don't know why we need one for a puppy. Most of us, when we get puppies, we keep them in the house where they belong and not in the yard. And we train them, and we walk them on a leash, not pin them up in the yard and behind a 5-foot fence. We got a garden in the front yard, had a garden in the front yard. Right off of Gilbert Street, there's a garden in the front yard, out of character, totally. Now we got another garden in the front yard, out of character, totally. Those kind of things are inappropriate in a small neighborhood with houses close to one another. So in summary, I'd like to see this fence either taken down, and I know that'll cost money, or I'd like to recommend that one option would be to leave the post up, cut them down to the required height, remove the hog wire, and if he wants to contain a dog in there, he can take those the cross boards that go from top of pole to the bottom of the pole and run them parallel to the ground, one higher, one lower, and put pickets on them. And the other option would be to take it to the right height and take the wire down and leave the cross boards on there. Another thing that he could do is run a fence from his back of his garage up towards Roswell Street vertically and put his puppy back in the back where he's already got a fence around a swimming pool, and the puppy would have plenty of yard to be in and not be subject to getting in the swimming pool. I don't know, I just strongly oppose this fence, and I hate to see him have to take it down, but it's not good like it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak for or against item 3C? Good morning. I'll ask you the same questions. Could you please state your name for the record?
Absolutely. My name is Liz Davis. I live at 1351 Roswell Street. I've been there a long time. The only thing I would like to add to what Ron said is that this is a two-sided fence with 3 different types of gates. One's wooden, one's wire, and one's like a gate you drive into. The third side Patrick said that he was going to tie on to the existing wire fence in his backyard and take it to the gate. And I don't think a wire fence of any type is appropriate. And so I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Thurman, I want to give you an opportunity before we call for a vote on this. First of all, is there anyone else here that would like to either speak for or against other than the applicant? Mr. Thurman, so you've heard the staff kind of give the background. You've heard a couple of your neighbors who are here in opposition. The question before this board is whether or not to allow the 5-foot fence. It's really about the height, right? And you heard staff accurately talk about instances in which this city, where staff would recommend approval to this board, and subsequently this board has approved fences in the front yard higher than 4 feet. However, it's only under certain situations that this property does not meet. Also, you've heard staff talk about the 4 standards that all variance requests, no matter what, are measured against, and that your application does not meet any of those standards. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity, if you had any closing words or anything like that.
No, I appreciate the clarification on your part. I'll also say to the Davises, I really do appreciate all that they've done over the years to make Smyrna what it is. When we first moved in the neighborhood, the first conversation I had with the Davises was to tell them how much we like their property, and that's one of the reasons we bought our property, because it looks out on theirs, and they've done a great job of maintaining it. And unfortunately, the response to that was that they wanted to block our view, and so they closed us in with bushes surrounding our property, so we couldn't look out. I was also informed they didn't like the 6-foot fence that was there previously because it was like a big wall, and that's why I took it down. And that's why I built a fence that isn't a big wall. So here we are today. So Ron, Liz, I'm doing my best as well to not make it personal. Feels like I'm getting pushed around on a regular basis. Sorry if I should have given you more heads up on the goats. Sorry if I should have given you more heads up on the goats. I was trying to do the right thing, knocked on your door to speak about it. So if I've done anything to offend you, I do apologize. And I'm sorry I built a 5-foot fence when it should have been 4 feet.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Any questions for staff? Okay. Hearing no other questions or comments, we've already heard public hearing. Public input's closed. If there are no other comments from this board, I'll call for a motion for item 3C.
I make a motion to deny V20-053, allow 5-foot fence in the front yard, land lot 560-2711 Gilbert Street.
Second.
Motion to deny has been seconded for item 3C. There's no further discussion. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes 3-0 to deny. I will say to Mr. Thurman or any other applicant, any decision by this board is appealable. I believe that the appeal has to be in writing within 10 business days. If there's any need for clarification on appeal, I would refer you to our city attorney, Mr. Jeffrey Tucker. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 3D, public hearing V20-054 to allow new construction on lot of record below minimum requirements, land lot 486, located at 1069 McClendon Avenue, Kingsville Properties Incorporated, as the applicant. And just before the last, if there's anyone here, including the applicant, that is here to either speak for or against item 3D, I would ask that you would step forward now, please, to be sworn in. Sir, do you represent the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. And there anyone else here for this item?
The applicant doesn't have to be sworn.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me. All right, sir, you can go ahead and stay. Sorry. All right, so if you would, please state your name for the record.
My name is Hal Simpson.
And Mr. Simpson, what's your relation to Kingsville Properties?
I am the owner of the company.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about 1069 McClendon Avenue and about this variance request.
Yes, I bought the house at 1069 McClendon. It's a 2-bedroom, 800-square-foot house, which my intentions are to tear the house down and build a new house on the site.
Okay. Any questions at this time for the applicant? Okay, sir, if you could please have a seat for a minute. We'll call it Ms. Crow for the background.
All right, again, Caitlin Crow, Planner 1, Community Development. So this variance is V19-054 to allow the new construction on a lot of record that's currently below minimum requirements. So this subject property is only 0.26 acres. It's on the northwest intersection of McClendon Avenue and Hollis Street, just behind the Wade's Restaurant there on Concord. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing home, as Mr. Simpson said, and build a new single-family home on the subject property. However, Section 1208 does require a variance to build on a lot of record below minimum requirements. So the lot is 11,666 square feet, whereas the R15 zoning district does require lots to be 15,000 square feet. The subject property is an existing lot of record, and there are no other variances required to build this new home, which will be a 2-story, 3,000 square foot detached home. Additionally, as he mentioned as well, the existing 1-story structure, it was actually built in 1952 and is only 744 square feet, which is well below the minimum house size of R15 district of 2,000 square feet. So with the proposed demolition and the rebuild, the new home will actually now be fully in compliance. So the subject property is unique that it does have less square footage than what the R15 district requires, and there's already a home on the existing lot. The hardship's not self-created since the property is the existing lot of record. So the variance is the requested variance is the minimum variance needed to build a new single-family home. Even if it was a smaller home, it would still require the variance. And furthermore, variances of this nature have been approved in the past, so no negative precedent would be set. Community development does not believe that building this new single-family home will negatively impact any of the surrounding neighbors. It has been properly posted. There's no site distance issues. So after reviewing the variance application, staff does support the request and recommends approval to allow a new construction on the lot of record below minimum requirements with the following condition. Approval of the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan and elevations submitted with the variance application. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I'm sorry, did you say there's no other variances required?
Correct. This is the only one required to have this house happen. All right,
Mr.
thank you.
Simpson, thank you, Ms. Crow. Mr. Simpson, you heard staff just read background into record, and if you could please come forward. And in her statement, she mentioned the condition, which is a standard condition. Are you accepting of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do you have anything else to add?
No.
Any other questions for the applicant or for staff?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll ask one more time. This is a public hearing. If anybody is here to speak either for or against V20-054, I'd ask that you'd step forward. Seeing none, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve V20-054, allow new construction on lot of record below minimum requirements, land lot 486, located at 1069 McClendon Avenue, Kingsfield Properties Incorporated.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, motion to approve. Item passes 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Next item on the agenda is item 3E, public hearing variance request V20-051 to allow reduction of minimum lot size from 20,000 square feet to 19,463 square feet, 0.85 acres, land lot 557, located at 1460 Memory Lane, CMS Custom Homes, LLC. Again, just like all others, if I know that we have several people here, if there's anyone here that either wants to speak for or against item 3E, I would ask that you would step forward and be sworn in at this time. Anybody other than the applicant? Thank you. And again, we'll call for public input in a minute. So CMS Custom Homes is the applicant. If you would please step forward. You represent the applicant, sir?
I do.
You could please state
Thank
your
you, Mr. Chairman.
State
Yes, Scott Peters, professional address is 1100 Peachtree Street in Atlanta. With me today as well from CMS Custom Homes is Mr. Reggie Lopes and Mr. David Sutherland.
Okay.
This request, similar to the last one, is to allow two existing substandard platted lots of record to be developed, each with a single-family home on an R20 lot which is slightly below the 20,000 square foot requirement.
Right.
Each is a substandard lot of record. Lot 11 is 19,463 square feet, and Lot 12, which is the corner lot, is 19,595 square feet. As you know, and Mr. Chairman, as you've stated today, this is not a political process. This is not a legislative process. This is a quasi-judicial process. It is not a popularity contest. It is, do we meet the standards in the code for a variance to be granted? And we would submit to you that we do. We also note that staff has found that we meet those conditions and recommends approval of this request. If I could start by giving you a little bit of history of the property. It was originally platted in 1951. And if I may, I have some maps that I was hoping I could provide to you. What would be the best way to do this? Sorry.
Just give to Tina. He's got some items for us.
And as you can see in kind of the center left of the page there where it indicates 1460, 1470, that is the property in question. And this came straight from the City of Smyrna's GIS system. So the property was originally platted in 1951, and that plat was submitted to the Cobb County Planning Commission, where it was reviewed, approved, and then filed of record in the real estate records. That plat, which is in the materials you have, encompassed 15 lots. There were 10 lots on Memory Lane. Those would be what is shown there as 1460 through 1500 Memory Lane, 1461 through 1501 Memory Lane, the ones on the north side of the street. And then it also included the 5 lots along Northview, which is 3194 through 3150. Those were the 15 lots included in that subdivision plat. 4 of the lots on Memory Lane, the 2 subject lots as well as the 2 adjoining it, were substandard in size. They were below 20,000 square feet when platted, and they remain that way today. The property was subsequently annexed into the City of Smyrna in 2001. At the time it was annexed, the property apparently was zoned R20 at that time, although the minutes that were submitted do not show that zoning, but everyone believes that was when the R20 zoning designation was given to it. So at the time the property was annexed and zoned, those lots became substandard under the City of Smyrna's code. Next, what happened is in 2007, the City of Smyrna adopted Section 1208, which is the substandard lot of record, the provision that we're here pursuant to seeking these variances. Prior to that adoption of that code section, you could actually build on a substandard residential lot in the City of Smyrna. So it was in 2007 that the problem arose after some 56 years after the property was originally platted. The property has never been replatted or combined, and in fact, under the City of Smyrna's subdivision ordinance, Section 406, a combination of lots can only occur through approval of the city. So conduct cannot change that. So the lots, in order to combine lots, there has to be a subdivision process or a plat process that is approved by the city. There's no question that did not occur in this case. Also, throughout the chain of history, chain of title for these properties, they have always been sold in the deeds referencing the 2 lots. They've not been combined and indicated, just a meets and bounds legal description. They have always been sold as lots 11 and 12 of the Collier subdivision. The prior house that was on the corner, that house was fully contained within the corner lot, lot 12. The adjoining lot, there was a swimming pool and there was a shed. but the house itself was fully contained within the one single lot. So again, there was not a house straddling the property line, which would indicate some sort of abandonment. That did not occur. So, as you can see, what we're requesting is not inconsistent with the neighborhood. Every lot that I have a red asterisk on here is a substandard lot. It is below 20,000 square feet. So as you can see, that encompasses 1480, 1490 Memory Lane, 1445 through 1483 Collier, 1493 through 1553 Collier. I'd also point out that those 5 lots that were originally included in the subdivision plat in 1951 on Northview are in fact zoned R15. Those lots are consistent with the size of these other substandard lots as well. They're slightly smaller, maybe in the 18,000 square foot range, but they're not down closer to the 15,000. So clearly there is a recognition here that there are substandard lots, and that the city has recognized that through the zoning of R15 to allow those lots to be developed. Now, the question here is, do we meet the standards for the zone, for the variance request? And I would submit to you that we do. First is whether there are unique and special circumstances or extraordinary and exceptional conditions applying to the property in question, or as to the intended use of the property that do not generally apply to other properties in the same zoning district. Here, the answer to that is yes. These lots were platted in 1951. They have been substandard in size since that time, and it was not until a change in the law that they could not be built upon as separate lots. So it is a function of the change in the law and the fact that the city zoned these lots as R20 in 2001, despite the fact they did not meet the requirements of the R20 standards at that time it was annexed. Secondly, whether any alleged hardship is self-created. And again, the answer to that is no. These lots were platted in 1951. They have always been this size, and it is a function of the zoning of the property and the change in law in the city of Smyrna not allowing substandard residential lots to be built on that has created this hardship. Third, whether strict application of the relevant provisions would deprive the applicant of reasonable use of the property. The answer again is yes. These are 2 lots of record. They're entitled to be developed as 2 lots of record. That was what it was always intended. As you look around the neighborhood, you see this would be consistent with the neighborhood. And constructing one significantly larger house on a lot that's double the size of everything around it is not consistent and is not reasonable. And finally, whether the variance proposed is the minimum required to allow for the use of the property. And again, the answer to that is yes. Here, we are not seeking any other variances. We are not seeking setback variances. We are not seeking lot coverage variances, anything else. We are seeking solely the variance from the size of the lots. Finally, I would conclude my presentation with pointing out that in the staff report, they indicate that the density we're requesting is effectively 2.2 units per acre. The density for 20,000 square foot lots, if you just consider the lots in question, which is what staff did here, is 2.178 units per acre, a difference of 0.042 units per acre. It's not a big difference. And again, we would point out to you that just about every lot, actually every lot that abuts our property is substandard. So we thank you for your consideration and respectfully request the opportunity to rebut at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Any questions at this time for the applicant's representative? Thank you. So for background on this one, I'm going to call Community Development Director, Mr. Rusty Martin, for the background.
Good morning. Rusty Martin, Community Development Director. I thought Mr. Peters summed up the outline of the events that have taken place up to this point. They are requesting to reduce the lot size from 20,000 square feet down to 19,400. square feet more or less for the existing lots of record to be able to build on these substandard lots of record. Originally, these lots were taken to mayor and council as part of a rezoning. There was a question as to whether or not they were lots of record at that time due to the Cobb County Tax Assessor's Office showing it as one lot, and there just being questions. We thought it would be best for council to address it, and we thought at that time it would go through pretty easy, but that was wrong. With that being said, it went to mayor and council, went to P&Z, they denied the request. It went to mayor and council, it was denied at that point. We've gone back and looked at the records and answered the question of whether or not there are two lots of records. At this point, there is, and so the question at this point is it two substandard lots of records based on our zoning ordinance that require a variance for approval. Community Development has reviewed the request against the standards of review. We've reviewed it against the adjoining properties in the surrounding neighborhood, and we've taken into consideration the historical facts on the property in the neighborhood itself. Community Development is recommending approval of the requested variances. We did recommend approval during the rezoning process, so we'll stay consistent at this point as we move forward with this. And our only stipulation is that they build the two homes according to the site plan submitted and the elevations submitted, which were site plans and elevations that were negotiated during the rezoning process with the applicant and the community. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions for you guys.
All right, so thank you. Okay. So just for clarification, I got several things here. You mentioned, that this request a little bit different. I would assume you mentioned it went to planning and zoning first, then it went to the council, which is a normal progression. Right, so I say a little bit different of a request, I assume, because this board doesn't hear zoning issues. That's for planning and zoning and ultimately for the council, right?
Right.
So what it is that this board is hearing strictly is just whether or not to allow minimum lot size of 19,463 square feet in an R20 area, which is 20,000 square feet, right?
Right.
Okay, so is it that, I've heard, this whole, is it one lot, is it two lots, right? So just for clarification, I think I heard you right. The official plat, does it show it as two lots, lots 11 and 12, as the applicant's representative described?
Yes, there's not a consolidation plat consolidating two lots into one at this point. So
okay. And as stated earlier, this property was originally in Cobb County. It was annexed into the city, I think, in 2001, and it was annexed, as best we can tell, as an R20.
yeah.
Okay,
So
except for there's a few lots that are R15.
So the process of annexation is, and I believe this was an island annexation, so they brought in a large area with multiple properties. And typically, state law requires that if you bring in a property and there's no zoning change associated with it, that property maintains the city's closest zoning classification to the county's classification. So in if the property is zoned R20 in the county, we have an R20 zoning district in the city, we'll apply that standard. Now, I wasn't here at the time when that happened, so I'm sort of assuming what the decision making was going on at that point. But so when that property came in, we placed our R20 zoning designation on it. It made those two lots and the adjoining lots substandard lots of records under the R20 zoning district.
Right,
So
which is not uncommon
Yeah,
in the city, right?
right.
Okay.
I mean, there are other neighborhoods that have substandard lots of records, obviously. Smyrna Heights is one, Cheney Woods has some, and Williams Park, I'm sure, has some as well. So it's not an uncommon occurrence to have to deal with these issues.
So there are 2 official lots of record.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
Based on the fact that there are 2 separate lots, we're still hearing this as one request for both lots? Because you
Yes.
have 2 separate property sizes.
So
One
the
is-
agenda items allow reduction of minimum lot size from 20,000 to 19,463. Mr.
Yeah.
Martin, I'll give you 1 second, Mr. Peters. Mr. Martin, if you could address that question first.
Yes, because that's the address that was originally on the property, so we just processed it as one request for both of them.
Okay.
Because they're one and the same. If you deny it, they're going to be stuck with one lot, or they're going to be building one house out there.
Okay.
So,
Well, I think just for the purposes of the record, we are looking at one lot size that would be Lot 12 of 19,465 total area, and Lot 11, which would be total size of 19,595, which I think the developer had stated in his opening statement as well.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Martin? Thank you. Mr. Peters, I believe that you had.
We did submit 2 variance applications, one for each lot, but in discussions with staff, we consented to these being consolidated in one hearing, that it's the same issue and
Rather
there's
than-
no
rather
sense
than
doing
2.
it twice.
Right, okay.
I'll point out that because of the actual size of both of the lots, if the variance request as stated, meaning lower the minimum lot size to 19,463, is approved, that would apply equally to both of them because both of them exceed that size.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I know that we had several people stand and be sworn in, so if, at this time, if there are no other questions for either the applicant or for staff, I will open this up for public input. If there's anyone here that would like to speak either for or against item 3E, I would ask that you'd step forward at this time, please. Good morning, sir. I'm going to ask you just a few questions, just like before. Could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Mike Terry.
Good morning, Mr. Terry, and what is your address?
I live at 3480 Pine Tree Drive, which is right around the corner from this property.
Okay, so that's kind of the last question is what's the relation of your property, the subject property you mentioned around the corner? Does your property adjoin or abut
No.
to the subject property?
No.
Okay, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning. My name is Mike Terry, as I stated, and my wife and I live on Pine Tree Drive. I'm a lifelong resident of Forest Hills, and one of the few remaining, I might add. Some of you know that I was chair of the P&Z committee for 7 years before I moved to Cobb County, where I was chair of the Planning Commission for 10 years. And it hasn't been long ago that I left that position. So because of my longtime residence and background, the neighbors have asked me to look at this case and to give them an opinion and give them and share my thoughts with this case as I reviewed it. And I'm going to share that with you here today. Our Smyrna's zoning and land use ordinances require, as the attorney mentioned, several things that have to be complied with in order to get a variance. One of which is, does a hardship exist? And in my opinion, that's one of the most important, if not the most important requirement that this applicant has to comply with. The owner has to show that this variance, if not approved, would cause significant economic injury to the owner. Significant economic injury. But that's not the case here. The owner is not prevented in any way from using this property as it was intended and as they promised the previous owner they would do. And I'll get into that in just a minute. To get this variance, the owner has to show that the application of our ordinances creates an unusual hardship on them and that certain conditions exist that are peculiar to this property. What kind of conditions? What makes up a hardship? There are lots and lots of things. A few examples are the odd shape of the lot, doesn't apply here. Difficult topography, doesn't apply. Water on the lot, undiscovered rock, poor drainage, bad survey, restrictive covenants, and on the list goes. None of that applies because, frankly, there is no hardship here, none whatsoever. If there is a hardship, I would have to say it's self-created, and the laws of Georgia say that self-created hardships are not allowed in a case like this, period. This seems to me and to most of my neighbors to be all about profits. They've already been told by P&Z and council that they would all prefer, the neighbors would prefer, one nice lot on this property as it has been for more than 60 years. 60 years. But they come before you to try and get a variance so that they can do what they wanted to do all along, and that is put two very large houses on this property. This is about profits, and profits can never be something that this body or a council or P&Z should use when they consider this case, and that's a fact. So what did they tell Ann Melton, who was the previous owner of this house? And this is important. Someone said earlier, it may have been the attorney, that this is not really about feelings and that sort of thing, but I want you to consider this. Ms. Melton, who had owned this property since 1953 and lived there all those years, was sold this property under the pretext and with the promise that her house would not be demolished, that it would be remodeled, that they had a relative, I think it was a son, that would live there for a while, and if they demolished this property, if they demolished this house, they would build back one house on this property. And so that's what she was told, and based on that, she sold. One of my neighbors who couldn't be here today, I see his wife is in the audience, who knows as much about zoning as I do, asked her, Ann, did you get that in writing? And she said, well, no, they really seemed like such nice people. I'm sure that's what they intend to do. But let me tell you what happened. 30 business days, 30, after they closed and gave Ann her check, they filed for the city for a demo permit, and they tore the house down. So what was their intention all along? I think that tells you everything you need to know right there. They intended to build two houses here. The applicant has said that this has always been two lots. Well, that's a little bit misleading. From the very beginning, here again, over 60 years ago, Cobb County considered this one property. How do I know? Because they sent one property tax bill with one description for the entire property. It wasn't two, it was one. When the city annexed it in 2001, they did the same thing. They considered it as one property, one tax bill. The deed document even spells it out that way. It's always been one property, no matter what the attorney just told you here. That's what we always considered it. That's what Ann Melton considered it. Is what they want to do really compatible with the neighborhood? We heard that addressed as well. They started out telling the neighbors way back last year, we'll probably build 4,000, 4,500 square foot home here. But that has changed over time. If you look at the plans that they submitted, which I know you have a copy of, and you look at it carefully, both of these houses that they want to put there are well over 5,000 square feet each. Now, I don't know where you live, but that's a darn big house where I come from. That's a really big house. They also say a big house wouldn't sell. If we put just one big house on this lot, we'll have trouble selling it, and that's not fair. Well, the evidence doesn't support that either. We have lots of large houses that sell in this neighborhood all the time, $750,000 up to $1.3 million. So if they build one nice house here, they will be able to sell it. Forest Hills is a very nice neighborhood and a very desirable neighborhood. They've given some examples, which you heard read into the record, and you were given a map. Some examples that they say supports what they want to do, but I contend to you that if you go out just a little farther than that, they've been very selective in the examples that they gave. We found 35 homes in the area that had major remodel work done. Now, I'm not talking about finishing a basement. I'm talking about major remodel work, big-time remodel. We found 28 homes that were demolished to the ground and built back new homes. But in every single case, these 63 houses that are all within a stone's throw of this area were one house on one lot. No zoning had to be changed, and what few variances were granted were minor. They were setback issues by and large, how close to a lot line, for example, they can get. This, and the most important thing, I think, is that this really is an end run. This is where they're trying to bypass and ignore what P&Z told them, what council told them, and what the neighbors have told them. Now they're coming to you and they're asking for permission to get variances that will allow them to put two houses here, which is what they've wanted all along. I don't think we can go down this path. I hope that you don't. If we do this, I think it opens the door for other rejected developers to do the very same thing, to get around what council told them they'd like them to do, which is one house, one lot, R20 zoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Ms. Monahan, just for the record, I know that for everybody here, there's a 5-minute limit on speaking. We're going to just waive that. I think this is an important issue, and I think that we need to hear what everybody has to say. So we'll go ahead and waive the 5-minute requirement. But thank you for that, Ms. Terry. If there anybody else that wants to come and speak on behalf that's already been sworn in. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Same questions. I'm fine, thank you. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. My name is Brian McCarthy, and I live at 3162 Northview Place. If you look on the one of the R15s on Northview.
Okay, so the relation of your project or your property, the subject property, you do not abut or join the property. Is that correct?
No, sir. We're I guess you call it catty corner.
Okay.
Or kitty corner, however you grew up.
Okay, exactly. All right, sir, go ahead.
I really enjoy following Mr. Terry because I don't really have to say much. He stole most of my thunder in a great way. The biggest thing for me is that the hardship issue, they frankly just paid too much for the lot. And they're deeming that a hardship because they're trying to separate it now into two lots. They just paid too much for it. That's really the biggest hardship that they created themselves. I'm not privy to all the conversations with Ms. Melton in terms of who was going to develop it and what they were going to use it for, so I won't really comment to that. The other issue is that, you know, I don't know if Mr. Terry used my house as one of the examples, but I have recently redeveloped my property, and I'm not aware of us using any sort of, or needing any variance setback at all. We simply dozed the house and literally put it in the same foundation. And so in terms of one lot, one house, that's really just where I'm coming from. Again, to echo Mr. Terry, it's a hardship that was created by them for paying too much, and then it's one house, one lot development in terms of not needing any sort of variance. There's plenty of houses that are redeveloped in the neighborhood.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Chad Koenig, and I live at 1471 Memory Lane, which is the house directly across the street from this property.
Okay, so your property is directly across the street from the subject property.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
So my wife, Katie, and I, we've lived in Smyrna for 20 years. We've always admired Forest Hills the whole time we've lived in Smyrna, and looked hard over the last 10 years to find a property in there. And we're fortunate enough 6 years ago to buy this property, which is now our home. And, I've raised our kids there. I got a daughter at Georgia right now, and all three of our kids went through Campbell High School. And what drew us to Forest Hills is just the quaintness. And how
go
pretty,
dogs.
That's right, go dogs. And just how pretty it is. Look, we have no issue with somebody buying property and trying to recreate a home there. Everyone's entitled to do that. But our two concerns are, and one of which became obvious recently with the deluge of rain that we had over this past weekend. There are water issues in Forest Hills that homes deal with. Mm-hmm. Our neighbors directly next to us, that kind of going down to Collier, both of those homes have experienced water coming in from Collier Place. There's actually a pipe that comes onto one of our neighbors' yards and has caused flooding in another neighbor's basement and has impacted the bottom of our street on Memory Lane. And so while the attorney makes this argument of this being two lots and 70 years ago, well, 70 years ago the houses were 1,200 to 1,400 square feet. In fact, the house right next to this lot is on the market for right now. It was built in the 50s, and it's 1,200 square feet. And one of our concerns is if you put two large homes, 5,000 square feet or so, plus driveways, on this lot, sitting at the top of the hill, the properties around it are going to be negatively impacted. And while the attorney says, oh, it's a small amount of footage and it shouldn't make a difference, that's great. They would build the homes, they would sell them to people, and they would move on. But the rest of us that live there and plan to live there the rest of our lives would be dealing with that, right? So that's one of our concerns. The other one, too, is just like Mike and Brian said, just concern about starting a precedence here. Forest Hills is a beautiful community. We all love it. We love its location. And, homes are becoming larger in this neighborhood. And if you allow this to happen, it just opens the door for future builders to do the same. So anyway, thank you for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Billy Hobbs. I live at 1510 Collier Place in Smyrna.
Okay, Mr. Hobbs, and what is the relation of your property to the subject property? Your
I'm in the
property's off
Forest Hill
Collier.
subdivision, but I don't see the property on a daily basis.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
So with that, let me start by telling you about the developer, because Chad and I are friends in the neighborhood, and so I see this gentleman who just built his new home in the neighborhood. We walk the neighborhood almost on a daily basis, and I need to correct Chad in saying that this developer is not going to move on. The developer is my neighbor in Collier Place, so we are fully vested in the neighborhood. David's stepson has just purchased a home in the neighborhood. My daughter is buying a home in the neighborhood. So we're not going anywhere. And what you ought to know about David is he needs to make a profit on the property. There's no doubt about that. But he's going to do it right. The attorney has already stated that these are two lots. The homes are going to be approximately 4,400 square feet, or one home 5,200 feet or larger. If I'm walking the neighborhood, I would prefer to see two homes, candidly, on two lots. But what I want to share with you about David is this. David has a stepson, but his family, he has 5 children who are able to drive. And in our neighborhood, he did not have enough garage space. So he bought the house behind him so that he could build a 3-car garage so that he didn't have a fleet of vehicles in the cul-de-sac in front of our house. So I want you to look at the character of a man who is taking care of his neighbors and looking out for them. And I appeal to you to support 2 homes on 2 lots. And with respect to Mr. Terry, I'm in commercial real estate. Chad's in commercial real estate, and I know he'll back me on this. If they told the neighbors they weren't going to demolish the house, that neighbor should have put it in writing, which it was not. So once the contract, they paid fair market value for the contract. Once that contract closed, deal over. Game over. They can do whatever they want within reason of what you guys are saying. They can do whatever they want on that property. I understand the sympathy. I truly get that. I don't know what their underlying mission was. I have no clue about that. But at the end of the day, once the contract is closed, it's over. So I ask you just to consider it. I personally, as a neighbor, a vested neighbor in Forest Hills, I personally support 2 homes. I'd rather see 2 homes than a large home. And I know that they will work with the neighbors to get them comfortable with heights and sizes, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. morning.
Morning.
Could please state your name and address for the record?
Charlie Bounds at 3150 Northview Place. Should
Okay.
be on the map there.
And so does your property adjoin or abut the
Doesn't-
subject property?
It does not. So
Okay.
I'm in a pitching wedge away from the property, and I pass it because I'm on a dead-end street. I pass it coming and going.
So we've heard pitching wedge, kitty cornered, catty cornered. Somebody else. Go
Yeah.
ahead, sir. It's a driver for Charlie. A driver, okay.
Thank you,
Wow.
Brian. So I'm a Smyrna native, obviously on Northview Place, as stated. You know, I speak for some residents of Northview and Memory who aren't here today or couldn't, you know, take time off from work to come show their opposition to this plan. But I did want to point out that the gentleman that just spoke, and then I guess the plaintiff, they live in Collier Gate. They don't live in Forest Hills. I mean, to us, that's a different neighborhood. So just wanted to point that out and make that clear that they're not necessarily residents of Forest Hills like we consider ourselves on Northview and Memory. But I just want to point out again that there's really no hardship case here to be considered. Again, P&Z denied the proposal. Council obviously voted no. Support Mike Terry's comments and just ask that you would also vote no to kind of help maintain some consistency in the decisions that are made at the city level, maintain the integrity of our neighborhood, and maintain the historical use of this lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Were you sworn in earlier, sir? Okay, Mr. Tucker. Good morning, sir. If you could please state your name and address.
My name is Brian McAlloway. I live on 3140 Northview Place, which is next door to Charlie's house. So
Okay, so your
it's
property...
definitely a driver for me.
A
to the
driver,
house.
pitch and wedge driver. So your property does not adjoin or abut subject
No,
property?
it's kind of 3 houses down, 4 houses down.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Just I had no plans on speaking today, but I heard Mr. Terry comment, and I just wanted to put validity to the lady that lived there, and I don't even remember her name, but we walked the neighborhood daily as well. And we spoke to her before she sold the house. She also indicated to us that the plans were that the man's son was going to live there and they were going to remodel the house. I did not know that she had told this to other people or was part of the contract, but I thought that was a valid point. And the house has been there for 60 years like that. The swimming pool's part of the house. It's on the other part of the lot. Seems to me that one house, one lot.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yeah. So I'm gonna give you an opportunity. Just so, sir, you're the applicant.
I am the applicant.
Okay. So if you would, just 1 second.
Okay.
Because I wanted to. I'll give you an opportunity in just a second.
A couple things were said that I think need to be rebutted.
I'm going to give you an opportunity. Yes, sir. Mr. Martin, if there's nobody else other than the applicant here to speak, one last chance. Mr. Martin, okay. Step forward, ma'am. Okay, you're going to have to come up and get any comments. You have to be sworn, and you have to get it on the record. So that means you got to talk in the microphone. Have you been sworn in?
I have not. I apologize.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Yes.
If you could just state your name and address.
Yes, Stacy Mason, 3184 Northview Place.
Okay.
So I'm directly across the street, and I just wanted to be noted that, you know, that the neighbors here are all right in the area. There are 8 of us here. We're not all speaking, but there are 8 of us homes right in the area that will be impacted by this. I have a ranch home, a ranch on a basement, and 2 homes being built in this lot will overpower and overtower the ranch homes that are in that neighborhood. I would like to see one large home built with the roof, with the second floor in the roof line. A 2-story home will overpower and be out of character for the homes that are existing for over 60 years in the neighborhood now. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make sure we give everybody a chance. So one more last call. All right. Mr. Martin, I've got a question, if you could, please, just really for some clarification. So we've all heard a couple, mostly people in opposition. There's one public input for support. Most of those people mentioned hardship, and I know that hardship is one of those standards that your staff measure, with any variance request. And rather than opinion, and this is really help and educate the rest of this board too. How is it that you measure hardship in this particular case, and what was the opinion of you or your staff on hardship for this variance request?
I guess to put it quite simply is the property was platted as 2 lots. That's the original plan. And moving from the original plat and plan of the development, or of the platting of the property, the city, and based on the rules and associated with zoning and everything else and annexation, there was a zoning district that was placed on the property that made it a non-conforming property when it came into the city. And then on top of that, the city added a requirement in 2007 that all substandard lots of record need a variance to get approved. So those are conditions that are outside the control of the property owner. So, which is pretty unique. Most of the other properties within the area, there's some that have the same issue, and then there's some that don't have the issue of the substandard lot. But the issues were created by government rules that were implemented on the property after the property had been platted. So that's where I'd come from with respect to the hardship of the property owner.
So your finding was that there was no hardship, or there's no self-imposed hardship?
Right.
Because
I mean, this is not self-created.
Right.
The gentleman the applicant that is in front of you today didn't build the house that was originally there in 1953 and
Right.
didn't do the platting in 1951. But there's vested rights that come along with a recorded lot of record. And, and the rules that were implemented after the platting of the property were not their decision. So they're exhausting every remedy possible to be able to address the issue, to be able to use the property in the way that it's allowed.
Right. Okay. So, and I guess it's just, I'm sure that you can see it makes it difficult when we have, even though it's the original and it's dated, by many years, the official lot of record shows 2 lots, right? But then
Right.
we've got testimony from Mr. Terry that, when the county has always considered it, with the tax bill, they send 1 bill and they don't send 2 bills. And, so I guess for me, it's just, what we have to go on is what the official lot of record is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the official lot of record, it was never combined and made from 2 lots, which was its original plat, into 1. It's
Right.
remained the 2 lots, right?
Right.
Okay, and I'd also like to point out, thank you, Mr. Martin, that like we stated earlier, this is an atypical situation for the License Variance Board, but this is not the same variance request that went to P&Z and subsequently to the council, because this board does not contemplate any potential zoning issues. So again, and I don't know how this is going to go, but the fact is that what's before the License and Variance Board right now is to whether or not to allow the reduction of a minimum lot size from 20,000 square feet to 19,463 square feet. That's what's before us now. Okay. And it's also true, like I stated earlier in one of these other, to another applicant, that any decision of this board can be appealed either way. So do any board members have any questions for either the applicant or for staff?
Only to say that I thought the applicant had comments that he wanted to make.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I told you I was going to give you an opportunity, and I almost didn't do it, did I?
Appreciate it.
If you could please state your name. and
Name is
address.
David Sutherland. I represent CMS Custom Homes. Actually live, as my neighbor mentioned, I have a home at the end of the street, Northview Place.
And what is that address, sir?
That is 3121 Northview Place, so at the end of the street.
Okay.
And so I've lived there in a home at Collier Place, so I've lived there for just under 20 years. So it's not like I'm just new to the neighborhood. This is been a part of this community for a while now, so I think that's important, that I'm not just a builder-developer rolling in here trying to impose my will. I certainly want what's best for Forest Hills as well, and wanted to address this issue of what was told to the previous owner, because I take offense to that. And I stood up here and held my right hand up and said I would tell the truth, and the reason I know it's the truth is because I was in the room. Okay, I was the one doing the talking. This is not hearsay. This is what was told to Miss Melton. And at the time I bought the house, there was a lot of discussion about a lot of things, but what I told her was we would assess the existing house and decide what was the best course of action. There was never any promises made about what we were going to do. And when you assess the house and you find it full of asbestos and in the shape it was in, it was just not practical to remodel the home. That was not what was going to happen no matter what.
Right.
So anybody that says otherwise doesn't know the truth, and they're misinformed, okay, first of all. Secondly, I think that when I look at the street and I look at the homes, and most all the homes are on about 20,000 square feet or less, as my attorney has mentioned, and so I struggle with the thought of building a home size appropriately for a 40,000 square foot lot. That just seems out of character to me. Why would you want to have a giant home on that corner lot there when all the other homes are on about 20,000 square feet? And so maybe that's just common sense. And to make me out as someone who's trying to make a quick buck is ridiculous. I'm trying to do what's best for the community here and build two homes that would be appreciated. So I struggle a little bit with some of the argument against this, but I wanted to at least set the record straight on, hey, this is what the truth is. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir, for the comments. Yes, sir, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, and Chad, I apologize, I didn't get your last name correctly, but I would like to address one of the comments, which was the stormwater issue. One thing to note is when this property is redeveloped, each of these lots, hopefully, will be required to have on-site detention. So contrary, to every other older home that's in here that would be remodeled on substandard lots, a new home has to have on-site detention. So it will actually improve the condition of water from these two lots. The other point, just to address a few items that were raised, the fact that the neighborhood perceived this as one lot is irrelevant to the determination. The fact that the Cobb County tax assessor sends one tax bill is irrelevant. The question under the law is, are they two lots of record? And the history and the facts make clear they are. They were platted as two lots. They've never been combined under either Cobb County prior to the annexation in 2001 or in the city of Smyrna since 2001. They have, yes, they have been sold to the same owner and may have been sold in one deed, but contrary to what Mr. Terry said and what's in the record is the deeds that transferred sold them as lots 11 and lot 12 of the Collier subdivision. Sold two lots. Didn't sold one piece of property, didn't combine them, sold as two lots. So I believe it's clear that they were never combined by the property owner. The house was built on one lot. It was not built to straddle the property line. There were accessory structures on the other lot, but they were not, the building itself was not straddling the property line. So I believe clearly the issue here is, do we meet the standards of the variance? And I think the answer is correct. And Mr. Chairman, just to confirm, the request that went to City Council was for a rezoning. It was not for variance. The rezoning, and through that process, those lots actually would have been smaller by about 1,000 square feet each, because there would have been a requirement to dedicate additional right-of-way to the city. Under this variance process, that's not required. So in effect, we're ending up with two larger lots than could have existed through that rezoning process, which admittedly was turned down. So the hardship here and the issue here, contrary to, with Mr. Terry, I respect what he said, but I believe he's wrong. There is a hardship. You don't have to, yes, there are many times when you see a hardship is created because it has strange topography, what have you. Here, it's a legal hardship. It was created by the city when it was zoned the way it was zoned, when the property was annexed, and the changes in the law. That is a hardship. We're not here arguing monetarily issues. What's a reasonable use? If you look at the neighborhood, a reasonable use are homes on lots between 19,000 and 20,000 square feet. That map I showed you, all those lots fit within that description. What's reasonable? That is reasonable, and therefore we would request that you approve these variance requests. Thank you, sir. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Any questions?
If this variance is approved, do you agree to all the conditions that has been placed on the building of these houses?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. If there are no other questions for either staff or the applicant or the applicant's representative, go ahead and call for a motion for item 3E.
I make a motion to approve variance request V20-051. Allow reduction of minimum lot size from 20,000 square foot to 19,463 square foot, 0.85 acres, land lot 557, 1460, Memory Lane.
Second.
We have a motion approved that's been seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Again, I'll state that any decision by this board is subject to appeal. Appeal has to be in writing. For any information or questions about the appeal process, Mr. Tucker would be happy to answer any of that. I tell you, I'll just state this is an atypical variance request for us. I've been on license variance for a long time, but just as a reminder, what's before this board with this item is whether or not to allow a slight reduction in square footage for an R20 lot. I've got the official lot of record right here in front of me, and the official lot of record is 2 lots, and that's just the way it is. We did not overturn anything that any decision by any other board, because the other boards heard a variance, a zoning issue. We did not hear a zoning issue. So again, if anybody wishes to find out more about the appeal process, I'm sure that Mr. Tucker would be happy to meet with you. Next item on the agenda is 4A, which is the approval of September 23rd, 2020 License Variance Board meeting minutes. If there's no discussion, I'd entertain a motion for those minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes of the September 23rd License and Variance Board meeting.
Second.
Motion to approve the minutes has been seconded for September 23rd, 2020 L&V. All those in favor? Motion approved 3-0. That is it. I will adjourn License Variance Board meeting at 11:27.